Umbilical comm checks complete. Stand by for ground station comm checks. Dragon SpaceX comm check.
And Dragon has you loud and clear. How many?
Core loud and clear. Ground station comm check complete. Stand by for Tetris comm check. Dragon SpaceX comm check.
And Dragon has you loud and clear. How many?
Core loud and clear. Tetris comm check complete. Stand by for comm checks with MD and LD in the launch configuration.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear. MD, how many?
MD loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear. MD, how many?
MD loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with LD.
Dragon, LD on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear. LD, how many?
LD loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, LD on Dragon to ground. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear. LD, how many?
LD loud and clear.
Dragon SpaceX. Launch configuration comm checks are complete. Report when ready for seat rotation per section 2 of 4.100.
And copy that, SpaceX. Step into section 2. SpaceX, Dragon, we're ready for seat rotation.
Copy that, Dragon. We will report when initiating.
We're T-minus 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 12 seconds, counting down for what is planned to be an on-time launch T0 tonight is 8 hours, 2 minutes, 56 seconds p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or just about 3 minutes after midnight Universal Time. Right now we're looking at a view of the Inspiration 4 crew. They're all in the capsule.
SpaceX initiating seat rotation.
And we are moving into seat rotation now. Everybody is anchored in the seat with the belts. We've done final checks, make sure they are all buttoned up and ready to go. And what we're going to do now is send command to the motor actuators under the seat. It'll rotate the 4 crew. Chris there on the left having a little fun there. They'll rotate them up into the launch position, which also gets them access to the launch displays that are overhead. I think right now they're also just waving out through the hatch at the ingress team that is now moved out of the way to make sure. And now the seats are rotating. This just takes several seconds to get them in position.
The launch position.
And there you heard a call out from Core to the Dragon crew.
SpaceX, we should say.
So the team's now in final position. We're right now in the countdown. Typically this comes at about T-minus 2 hours, 15 minutes. So the good news is we're running about 6 minutes ahead of the countdown. Next major activities up in the Dragon area will be just verifying everything is ready for closeout. We'll be doing leak checks of the suits. We'll be closing the hatch, doing leak checks of the capsule hatch. And then eventually T-minus 1 hour.
For awareness, our closeout lead is going to be climbing in to look at something on the cargo pallet, just for awareness.
Copy that, Tara.
And that's one of the examples. The closeout team is still there. They can still get inside the capsule. The hatch is open. And so they'll be able to check to see if everything is tied down correctly, nothing's loose in the cargo that's underneath the seats. But as I was saying, at T-minus 1 hour, the plan is the team will leave the crew access arm. They'll get out of the blast danger area, and that'll leave just the Inspiration 4 folks on top of the Falcon 9 for the last 15 minutes or so of the countdown as we prepare to head to space. Status right now, everything continues to look good. Falcon 9 has been quiet since we started the webcast. It'll start to pick up at T-minus 2 hours. We've got a few flight termination system checks that we go through. The biggies will come at about T-minus 1 hour when we're doing Merlin engine checks on the first and second stage, making sure engines are primed in with fuel. And then we'll carry the countdown from there as is typical. So a lot will pick up there. Dragon is pretty much in the mechanical activity right now. Earlier this afternoon, just around T-minus 4 hours, the Draco thrusters, these are the ones that are used for steering, orbit adjust, and to deorbit the capsule. We opened valves and pressurized the manifolds, so the Draco thrusters are in a flight pressurized configuration. And pretty much right now it is just getting the crew ready and getting the hatch closed and getting off of the pad. On the weather front, no new information other than the weather continues to look good. We've been talking about it. In addition, we are beginning to release balloons to measure the upper altitude winds, but everything is looking good in that case. So right now, the weather, the range, Falcon 9, Dragon, and the crew of Inspiration 4 all looking good for an on-time launch in just under 2 hours, 19 minutes.
And shortly, the crew will perform some suit leak checks, and these suit leak checks are a part of a series of checks to make sure that the crew is in great shape before liftoff. However, there is one check that some of us at SpaceX thought was missing from the process. It's a very important one, so we thought we should clear it up now before we go any further.
All right, if I had to choose between Star Wars, Star Trek, and then one of my other favorites is Stargate, SG-1, I would rather trek across the universe than fight my way.
I've heard, are you a Star Wars guy? Are you a Star Trek guy? those used to be true. I really think I'm a Battlestar Galactica guy, to be honest.
There's no question it's Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars fan, for sure. I would say that if I had to guess, it's a split crew between Star Wars and Star Trek. I don't know if anyone else would have dropped Battlestar Galactica. I don't know on that one.
Can't beat Captain Adama.
I think Jared is Star Wars. Cyan is Star Wars. Chris is the wild card, but I think he's Star Wars.
Oh, Jared is definitely Star Wars. I think Chris is probably Star Trek, but I'm not 100% sure. And I would think that Haley, she's the youngest. So I think maybe Star Wars. I think Star Trek is too old for her.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for Section 3, suit check preparation.
I kind of am a medical officer, so.
I don't know if we're like completely unified around that. I mean, there is other, sci-fi, spacey stuff that comes before Star Trek.
Okay.
They don't know they're wrong. Like, that's just, they learn that over time. Like.
I just love that. And I got to say, that kind of sounded a little Sith Lord-esque from Jared there. But I'm with Jared. I'm Team Star Wars all the way.
Yeah, I think I'm staying clear from all the discussions. I'm a casual fan of both, but I know there's passionate fans on both sides. I like them both.
Well, in my case, we're just listening. They're getting ready for suit leak checks. If you look in modern day, every day, I was reading the paper over the weekend, and I saw the new film museum here in Los Angeles. Part of that was described as the Death Star. On the other hand, on the next page in the paper, they're talking about a mansion up in the hills here above LA as the Starship Enterprise. So you kind of got an equal. But in my case, showing my age, I saw the first Star Trek episode on September 6th of 1966. So I'm Star Trek.
Star Trek for John. Can I pick Mandalorian? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Star Wars, I think.
It's the baby Yoda for me.
Yes, there it is. That one wins over a lot of hearts.
There's nothing wrong with that. So if you've just tuned in, the crew are in their seats. As you can see, they're buckled in. The seats have been rotated back to the launch position. They've undergone comm checks. And everybody, it's hard to see from this angle right here, but there's been a lot of camaraderie and a lot of big old smiles on their faces.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to make note of, we saw the crew respond back to Sarah Gillis, the core, with their call signs. So Jared is Rook, Dr. Cyan is Leo, Haley is Nova, and Chris is Hank. So we might hear some names get interchanged, but they got those call signs when they were doing their jet fighter training, which is a really cool sentence to say. Who else gets to do jet fighter training?
Right, that's very exciting. So only 553 humans have been to orbit, and most of those traveled as part of government or country-specific missions. As a result, the research conducted on those missions, particularly as it relates to humans in space, is often only accessible by the country or government that conducted the research. Now think about the possibilities if the data from all those missions could be made available to the broader science community for research. Inspiration 4 is a step in that direction.
Once in orbit, the crew of Inspiration 4 will conduct research that has the potential to improve human health here on Earth and for all future space travelers. All biomedical data collected during the mission, things like heart rhythm and rate, blood oxygen saturation, and other things, will be accessible through an open data repository and available for research.
To that end, SpaceX and the Inspiration 4 crew are partnering with TRISH, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, to collect data and biological samples from the crew before, during, and after this historic spaceflight. Part of NASA's Human Research Program, TRISH is a virtual institute that finds and funds disruptive science and medical technology in order to reduce health and performance.
For good suits.
Copy that, Dragon. We see the same. The closeout team will perform final closeout steps and then exit the capsule. Please report when ready to close the hatch.
Sounds like suit leak checks have been completed. Trish is a virtual institute that finds and funds disruptive...
Copy that, SpaceX. We're ready for side hatch closure when you are.
Copy that, Dragon.
Pausing for comms. Disruptive science and medical technology in order to reduce health and performance risks in space explorers.
Yeah, as we're getting ready to close out the side hatch, let's check in with Kate to take a closer look at the experiments the Inspiration 4 crew will conduct during their 3 days in orbit.
Thanks, Andy. I'm joined now by Diana Dial from our space operations team here in Hawthorne, and we're going to take a closer look at the research that the Inspiration 4 crew will be conducting on orbit.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, and great to be here. We're going to be talking about some of the biomedical research experiments that'll be flying on Inspiration 4 today. So off the bat, why are we even doing this? Obviously, our goal is to make spaceflight accessible and safe to everybody. And that means making sure that we understand what happens to the human body when folks go to space. Plus, with a lot of these experiments, we're also getting a better understanding of how to revolutionize healthcare here on Earth.
Now, that seems kind of like an interesting point because a lot of people assume that science done in space doesn't have anything to do with those of us that are still on planet Earth. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the things we see here and how they'll benefit not only us, those of us in space, but also those of us on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so off the bat, the technologies that we use for space, particularly for medicine, are actually miniaturized, they're mobile, and they can be used by non-physician or non-medically trained individuals. So that means that we can expand access to places where otherwise it's super remote, you might not have a medical provider, and these same technologies that we're going to be using, for example, on Inspiration 4, we use in remote care environments here on Earth.
And that handheld portion seems super important because
Absolutely.
In space, weight is everything. So I believe this is an ultrasound reader, and if you're familiar with ultrasound machines, they're usually much bigger and require a lot of training to operate and not possible to go to space. But this is actually what's going to be on board Dragon today.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the Butterfly Ultrasound. Normally, you guys may be familiar with an ultrasound that you see at the hospital, and it'll be about the size of this table. But this ultrasound device is not only handheld, portable, but also, as we said, can be used by a non-medically trained individual. So during Inspiration 4, our astronauts are actually going to be doing medical imaging while in space to better understand how body fluids change in the microgravity environment.
Now, in terms of the other things that we have on the table, I feel like, well, obviously the glasses are the coolest looking. We'll get to those. But how does this actually, like, how do they read when they're viewing, the ultrasound themselves? How do they actually get a readout for that?
Sure. So essentially, this ultrasound just plugs into an iPad or an iPhone. And essentially what they do is they'll plug it in, they'll use a little bit of gel, and then actually be able to apply it to themselves to visualize a number of organ systems in the body. So, for example, due to the fluid shifts in space, we want to make sure that we understand how blood flow moves in the microgravity environment, what happens to the bladder, for example, when it comes to urinary retention, and also we want to see how those fluid shifts could affect, for example, intracranial pressure. And so one of the analogous things that we'll be measuring is ultrasound on the eye. So all of these can be measured super easily using this just plugged in to an iPad or a phone.
And of course, that's important because intracranial fluid impacts vision, and vision changes while you're in space.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to get to the glasses.
Yeah.
They look like fun 3D glasses, but there's no 3D movies on this particular Dragon mission. So can you tell us a little bit about what those are used for and how they're helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. So while these look like a very cool prop, they are in fact for science. So what these glasses do is essentially a number of neurovestibular type of tests. So rewind, when we're here on Earth, our body is adapted to the gravity environment. And that means that folks essentially are able to orient to where they are located in physical space based on connection between the eyes, the inner ears, and the brain. And so what you do with this test is actually put on these glasses. And because
Can I try them on?
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you can see, Kate not only looks really cool, and everything's purple, but if you are to just use one at a time, the idea is that we're actually able to lateralize and localize different halves of the neurovestibular system to better understand when folks are doing a specific set of tests while wearing these glasses, how their adaptation to the spaceflight environment affects how they feel oriented and potentially might have space motion sickness, might feel dizzy or nauseous while they're in microgravity, and then once they return back to Earth.
So in terms of how, like, if I put these glasses on, how are you actually testing what I'm seeing?
Sure. So what would happen is that they would wear these glasses. They'll actually be doing some tests on something like this iPad. And then the results of those tests tell us basically which side and potentially more about what's going on with their neurovestibular system. Again, both in flight and then when they return.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diana Dial from our Space Ops team here at SpaceX in Hawthorne. Thank you so much for joining us and showing us firsthand some of the science that the Inspiration 4 crew will be getting up to over the next 3 days. Let's check back in with Andy to see what's happening out on that pad.
Thanks, Kate and Diana. Super cool experiments. So right now, over the next couple minutes, the crew will be completing final inspections of the spacecraft, followed by hatch close. And so the crew is doing a sweep inside of Dragon to make sure there isn't any foreign object debris, what we like to refer to as FOD. Basically, anything that doesn't belong, that shouldn't be inside Dragon, we want to make sure that that is not there anymore. So right now is a view of the Dragon capsule and the crew access arm to the right-hand side. The Inspiration 4 crew members are inside the top section of the Dragon capsule right now. And for those that are just joining us, this is a view from Kennedy Space Center in Florida off of historic launch pad 39A. We are about 2 hours away from liftoff. Everything is looking great today. Weather is looking great. And the crew has just been nothing but a bundle of joy since leaving the hangar, and super excited to be on a part of the mission.
It's crazy to think that, Andy, like you said, this is historic. It's pad 39A at Kennedy, and we can see the Atlantic Ocean there off the coast. And it's really crazy to think that, you know, just in the, what was 1969 was whenever we launched Apollo 11, which was, of course, the first mission that actually landed on the moon. And here we are a few decades later, I should say, launching the first orbital all-civilian crew. And we keep saying all-civilian, and what that really means is non-professional astronauts. So people like us four, and that are now going to space from the very same ground that, you know, Apollo 11 launched from decades ago. And it's, you know, just this transition and evolution of human spaceflight is so awesome to see. And of course, you know, we got a beautiful picture perfect background today. And it's just pretty incredible. And we're very thankful that we're able to, you know, introduce the next era of human spaceflight from this ground. You know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and everyone inside that capsule knows that as well.
Yeah, we talked about the Apollo missions and the Space Shuttle missions. Since SpaceX took over the lease in 2014, we have also been making a little bit of history ourselves. In 2018, we debuted the Falcon Heavy rocket test flight. And for those that remember, that launched Starman. Yeah. And Starman is out there right now in his Tesla, exploring space.
Listening to David Bowie.
Listening to David Bowie. Last year, we also returned... last year, we also returned crewed flight from American soil with the Demonstration 2 mission with Bob and Doug, and we also had our first operational crew mission last November as well. So
yeah, and that's actually
to march forward.
And that's actually the capsule that's flying today.
Yes.
That first operational crew mission, Crew 1, which launched in November 2020, that is the same capsule that the Inspiration 4 crew is flying in today. We like to refer to it as certified pre-owned.
Yeah, and everything that Kate and Andy just mentioned, you know, without all of that, we wouldn't be here today. And it's incredible to think that literally our 4 all-civilian crew members are sitting in the Dragon capsule right now, about to make the next step in human spaceflight. You know, we've always talked about, even before we were flying crew, that we always wanted to turn rockets into airplanes. Like, how do we turn, how do we turn such a difficult, costly flight into a more affordable and more often flight? And this is one step closer to that major step today, and just so exciting that we're actually here.
Absolutely. Yeah, reusability really is the thing that unlocks access to space. And personally, I am super excited for more people to be able to experience space, because there's something known as the overview effect. And that's essentially the effect that humans experience when they're able to look back upon planet Earth from a different perspective. And I honestly believe that, the more people that get to experience that, the better off planet Earth will be, as well as the human civilization.
Yeah, Dragon today is going to be flying 4 people. It can hold up to 7, so hopefully in the near future we'll see 7 folks flying in Dragon. It is, again, the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station, and will be the first private spacecraft to ever take an all-civilian crew to space and orbit. So we've got a really cool animation here of our Dragon vehicle.
So as we mentioned before, the pressurized section, the section that we actually see the crew in, is there at the top. The nose cone will open up and reveal the cupola, the observation dome, and we'll can't wait to see all the exciting views that they're going to see from there. And then if you look at the bottom portion, which the lighter side is reflecting towards us, we'll call it the Jedi side, and then the dark side now. I told you, Team Star Wars all the way. The dark side, which is actually the solar panels, which are one of my favorite things. We build them in-house here at SpaceX, integrate them onto the trunk, and that trunk will not be making its journey home. Unfortunately, that is not one of the reusable components of Dragon. It will be jettisoned prior to the capsule's re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere.
The capsule is what the crew will live in for the next 3 days. The volume of the Dragon is about 328 cubic feet. So once they're in space and in microgravity, they'll be able to utilize that entire space. And with the cupola, they'll actually get just a little bit more room. They get a little bit more volume inside of that capsule.
Yeah, the Dragon capsule itself also is outfitted with some engines. We have 16 Draco engines built into Dragon. We also have 8 Super Draco engines built into 4 separate pods. Super Draco engines are used as part of the launch escape system. We actually disarm that after we get into orbit. When we're in space, the Draco engines take over, and that will do a number of things. Micro adjustments in orbit, as also raising the orbit altitude later on after they depart from the second stage of Falcon 9.
Yeah, so you mentioned orbit there. Dragon is actually going to be orbiting higher than the International Space Station and higher than the Hubble telescope. It'll be orbiting at about 575 kilometers. And like we mentioned before, that observation dome is brand new to this mission. And from that height, views from the space station are amazing, but this crew is going even further. In fact, I think we have some footage of the cupola, and which, is one of my favorite things now on Dragon. It's just a gorgeous piece of hardware. Like I said, it's brand new to this mission.
Dragon, SpaceX, stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Please ensure that all items are secure from now through launch.
And copy that, SpaceX standing by.
There on your screen, we can see the pad closeout team closing the side hatch, which is one of the last visual things that we'll see here in the crew access arm.
The crew looks so excited. I think every little milestone, even if it's within 5 minutes, they get very excited. And I think they know what to expect. They've practiced this so many times. This is the real thing right now. So this is the real hatch closure before they lift off. And they will close the hatch, inflate a seal, they'll torque the hatch down and then perform some leak checks on that hatch.
Yeah, they'll inflate that seal and hold pressure to it for a few minutes and monitor that pressure to make sure that there's no leakage. And once we get confirmation of that, they'll basically put on the door on the door. It's a small piece that will actually go on where that torquing area is, which you can sort of see it there behind the closeout lead number 9 there on the right-hand side. But yeah, this process can take a few minutes, so they must be super excited. They can still hear the voices of the closeout team, but they can't go to space just yet. We're just under T-minus 2 hours until that happens.
Now, Kate, as you mentioned, T-minus 2 hours. In the timeline, they're right on the timeline. The plan was T-minus 2 hours to initiate the closing of the hatch. So the good news is on the Dragon side, everything's running just as planned. Falcon 9 side, again, folks checking in on station, but still fairly quiet on the launch vehicle for about another hour. And not to dwell on negative, but we have had, in the case of one of the NASA Crew missions, we closed the hatch. I think there's a little bit of debris got caught in the seal. We caught that, we opened it up. So there's even time in the procedure to be able to reopen the hatch if we have to, clean things up a little bit, close it, and retest it again. That's why we've got all the way until T-minus 1 hour before the SpaceX egress team there that you see finally has to get off of the pad.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that was Crew 1 that occurred on.
Does look like that closeout tech is cleaning the hatch doorway there. Make sure that there is no debris or FOD there.
You know, going back to something we talked about a little bit ago, the orbit of Inspiration 4, 575 kilometers higher than essentially any Americans have been since the Apollo flights to the moon. And before that, a couple of Gemini flights got up to about that altitude. But this is fairly rarefied air, so to speak, that the crew's going to. And one of the questions of Jared when they were picking the mission design was, why 575? You know, why don't you want to go, you know, typically we've been launching into 300 kilometers or so. But one of the purposes of this is to inspire. And you go a step beyond what we have done before. And so Inspiration 4, the fourth flight with people out of the U.S., or as Chris said, 39A, that's where Americans leave to go to space. And here they are today. And of course, Inspiration 4 representing the 4 crew members who are on board this mission.
Yeah, you make a good point with the fact that Jared wanted to inspire, and he's doing that in another way as well. You know, if you're watching on YouTube, you might notice that there is a donation button for St. Jude Children's Hospital. We are fundraising money for research and cures for childhood cancer, pediatric cancer, which is very near and dear to this particular mission. The individual that's seated on the far right-hand side of your screen there, that's Haley Arsenault. She is 29, and she actually is a pediatric cancer survivor. She had bone cancer when she was about 10 years old and had a surgery to remove it and underwent very intense treatment. During that process, she decided that she wanted to grow up and be a medical professional and work at St. Jude. And that's what she does now. She's a physician's assistant there. And she is representing the pillar of hope on today's mission.
Right, and this mission is a fundraising event. So if you are watching, as Kate said, on YouTube, there is a donation button. So please donate what you can. We've so far raised about $133,000 on the YouTube channel so far.
So if you've just recently joined us, on the right-hand side of your screen there is the Inspiration 4 crew. They are in their seats. The seats have been rotated back to launch position. They have undergone comms and leak checks. And the view on your right is the Dragon Capsule. That's where they're seated inside of that conical section. And we are awaiting a liftoff here in 1 hour and 53 minutes. Right now, the crew there inside that crew access arm is pressurizing the side hatch and basically working through the process to close the side hatch, lock it up, and retract the crew access arm.
Right now, we're just inside T-minus 1 hour, 53 minutes. Major activity coming up here as we are working the closing of the side hatch and then the leak check. Roughly about the same time, we ought to hear another series of communications checks. Earlier, we heard 3 comm checks from the crew down through the umbilical, which is the electrical line that connects the ground to the spacecraft. Then they also did a comm check over radio frequency to our ground stations there at Cape Canaveral. And then we also did a communications check through NASA's tracking and data relay satellites that are up in geosynchronous orbit, which we'll use during the mission. But one last group still to talk to is the SpaceX Falcon 9 launch team. So right now we've got hatch closed. You can see everybody peering at it, making sure the seams look good. And then we'll wait to start a clock and see that the hatch closure is good. And at the same time, listen to the crew eventually talk to Falcon 9 launch team. As we go past liftoff, you will hear call-outs, Falcon 9 avionics, guidance navigation and control engineer, propulsion engineer will be reading out status, and that'll be actually going from the firing room 4 up to the crew to let them know that things are looking good. So we're going to do a comm check to make sure all of those engineers can also talk to the crew and that each other can hear. Meanwhile, as we wait for comm checks and confirmations that the side hatch closure is checked out, successful, in the area we've got Falcon 9 team is clearing the flight hazard and the flight caution area, T-minus 2 hours. These are larger areas around the Complex 39A. So roadblocks are down.
Dragon SpaceX, we are commencing health checks for the launch escape system. Expect a momentary flight computer change, followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
And copy that, SpaceX standing by.
Yeah, we're going to do a quick check here that's planned on Dragon. This just changes what we call a command sequence on Dragon. They're not actually opening the side hatch and then going back to close it. That just changes states in their displays. But as I mentioned, we are clearing hazard and caution areas. No indications of any issues right now. We'll wrap that up in another half an hour or so. Falcon 9's looking good right now. Dragon obviously looking good. And the weather continues to cooperate. What we all like to talk about, but you can't do anything about it. With that, Andy, how are things looking on your end?
Yeah, our crew today, Jared, Cyan, Haley, and Chris have been training for this journey pretty much ever since the announcement that they had all been selected as crewmates for the Inspiration 4 mission back in March. What's super cool is that they're going through the same Dragon training as our NASA astronauts. And to prepare the Inspiration 4 crew for their mission, our teams at SpaceX have spent the last several months teaching the crew about orbital mechanics, how to live in space, and even running simulations of what a full mission could look like while seated inside of Dragon.
The Inspiration 4 crew has completed numerous simulations, including a 30-hour and 12-hour end-to-end simulation in our Dragon trainer. They trained not only at SpaceX, but they also did some centrifuge training, they flew fighter jets, and there's a photo from their fighter jet experience.
Yeah, I love the name that Haley got, the G Monster, because she pulled 8 Gs in the fighter jet, and she wanted it.
Right.
She's an absolute adventurer. I love it.
Yeah, that looked super exciting. They also completed a 0G flight, which simulated microgravity for a very short period of time, but there's a photo of them flying high there.
They all look like they're superheroes.
Right. Love it. They also climbed Mount Rainier in Washington together, which was a tough hike, 10-hour hike up the mountainside. But it looks like from that photo, they're almost enjoying themselves.
Yes. I believe it was a pretty strenuous hike up, and they also camped up there for several days at a ridge on Mount Rainier.
And then they even signed a Falcon 9 booster, which is their booster that is currently on the pad. And you can see them standing in front of the booster with their signatures there. Tradition started by the Crew 2 members that they are following in their footsteps with this. It's pretty incredible to see them. This team has studied nearly 100 different training lessons covering all aspects of the mission. At the end of training each week, the crew recorded video diaries of their experiences. In their own words, here's the crew talking about their various training over the last 6 months.
Jared Isaacman here, Commander Inspiration 4, and we're like 4 months and a day away from our intended launch date.
This week was really intense because we had a lot of the systems. We got to go into the sim.
Going through some CRM training and looking at what the mission overview is going to look like.
Talked a lot about teamwork and the SpaceX culture.
Week 2 of training at SpaceX complete. This was a heavy week.
I just completed another week at SpaceX, and it was intense.
A lot of good building blocks. So you start in the beginning of the week with smaller things like losing comms to, okay, some circumstances are not so good, and then some get really bad where you have to plan an emergency deorbit, which we initiate ourselves in that.
But man, challenging. I didn't realize how much upper body strength I need, so I need to hit the gym the next couple of months and build up some more muscles.
Today was my favorite day of training because today was the medical training day.
Learn some more about some of the medical experiments we're going to be working with and helping to advance what we know about humans in spaceflight.
We've all contributed all sorts of fluids now to the greater scientific cause.
But the best part is we all got in our spacesuits together.
We got to wear spacesuits, strap into the simulator, and feel like we were actually going to space.
Hello again, Chris here, and it's August 2nd, 2021. 44 days from our launch here in September. Everything keeps going to plan, and it's been an incredible week last week, working with SpaceX teams down at Kennedy Space Center, and then back here in Hawthorne this week for some sims.
This spacesuit that I got fitted for about 7 months ago, I actually get to see and try on and do a bunch of maneuvers in to make sure that it's comfortable and that I can move. And I am just so excited for this because, I mean, this is the spacesuit I'm going to wear leaving the planet.
I'm just so honored and thankful and grateful to be a part of this historic mission and a part of the SpaceX team.
Y'all are working so hard to get to Mars and beyond. We want to provide great data, and we're really excited to be part of this.
All right, well, thanks everybody for a fantastic time here in Hawthorne and also down at Kennedy. We've been doing training down there as well, so really appreciate everything you guys been doing.
This is my final call here from SpaceX, so Rook signing off.
Please begin the comm check with the crew.
Dragon, GNC on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, GNC. How many?
GNC loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by propulsion.
And what you're hearing right now, comm checks
Dragon, prop on countdown. Comm check.
between Dragon and the Falcon 9 launch team in firing room 4.
Prop, loud and clear. Godspeed. Have a good flight today. Stand by for comm check with the avionics engineer.
Dragon and avionics on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, avionics. How many?
Avionics loud and clear. Stand by for the comm check by the ground segment engineer.
Say that again.
Dragon, ground segment on countdown 1. Comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, ground segment. How many?
Ground segment, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by launch control.
Dragon, launch control on countdown 1, comm check.
Dragon, as you loud and clear, launch control, how many?
Launch control, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check by the chief engineer.
Dragon, chief engineer on countdown 1, comm check.
Dragon has you loud and clear, first, how many?
Have you loud and clear. Have a great flight. This completes our comm check.
Just inside T-minus 1 hour and 43 minutes. We've heard the comm checks between the Inspiration 4 crew up in the Dragon Capsule, up at the very top on the picture at the left, behind where the crew access arm is. That's where Dragon is with the crew right now. They're talking to the Falcon 9 launch team, located in Firing Room 4, just a few miles just west of the launch pad. Got a great view out the windows. Earlier we saw a picture of the crew signing their names on the booster that has flown to space a couple of times, and that's an example of reusability of the Falcon 9. We've talked reusability several times in the webcast, and our boss Elon Musk, he's made it clear for years and years, the holy grail of space travel, what opens up space for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization, is reusability. Without it, spaceflight is just not affordable. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, if you threw the airplane away after every flight, no one would be flying anywhere. So each step in SpaceX's history has been focusing on incorporating reusability step by step into our designs. First with Falcon 1, people may not remember, we did want to try to get the Falcon 1 first stages back so that we could look at them, not fly them again. We rolled that into Falcon 9, into Dragon, and now as we're going forward, even Starship program where everything there is reusable. So that's the holy grail. We've been attacking it a piece at a time. We're almost there in today's flight. We're reflying both Dragon and the Falcon 9 first stage.
Yeah, the Inspiration 4 mission will launch today on SpaceX's proven and reliable Falcon 9 rocket, as John just mentioned. The booster that's flying today previously supported the GPS 3-4 mission for our Space Force customer in November 2020, as well as the GPS 3-5 launch in June of earlier this year. To date, SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket has completed 138 total launches, with over half of those on reflown rockets. As for the Dragon spacecraft flying today, as I've mentioned before, it previously flew on the NASA Crew 1 mission in November of 2020. And overall, Dragon spacecrafts have completed 27 missions, including 25 visits to the International Space Station, 10 of those visits on reflown Dragons. So reusability, we're...
Dragon SpaceX, we have a good side hatch leak check.
And copy that, SpaceX. Good side hatch leak check.
All right, that is great news. That was just confirmation that the leak check that they performed on the side hatch, everything is good. So that side hatch will remain closed until those 4 individuals splash down back on Earth in 3 days after orbiting for that duration.
Yeah, it is important, again, that we do perform that leak check because we want to make sure that in the vacuum of space, the habitat inside of the capsule can withstand that pressure and make sure that the environment that the astronauts are in are hospitable. So that is, again, great news that we are continuing to march towards T0 on time. Everything seems to be going great so far. Kate, I do want to talk more about reusability. It is astounding that over half of our rockets are flown on reflown missions. I think one of the things is to refly rockets, you got to land them. And that, honestly, is my personal favorite, seeing the booster come back, landing on land, landing on the drone ship. It is quite a feat. And for those that have seen the webcast, you can see the rocket on screen right now. It doesn't quite do it justice. These are massive, massive vehicles.
Yeah, they really are. That's a great point. And something that I think kind of plays with our perception of the scale of things, especially is when we see the rockets landing on the drone ships out in the ocean, because the ocean is big, right? This drone ship looks small, but realistically, the drone ship is the size of a football field. And one of my absolute favorite memories that I've had in the 7 years that I've been at SpaceX, I actually was hosting the webcast when we successfully landed on the drone ship for the first time. So for anybody that might remember those days, there were a few unsuccessful landings on the drone ship where we learned a lot and eventually led to the first successful one. And that moment is seared in my memory, and the crowd just went absolutely wild. I mean, we've had a few events where the crowd has gone absolutely wild in this building for the historic moments that we made, but that one in particular with the drone ship landing for the first time is one of my top 3 favorite memories.
Yeah, that is pretty incredible, and it's what's gotten us here today. With the Falcon and Dragon system, we've proven you can build a reliable, reusable launch system for a fraction of historical cost. Our next step is to scale that up, basically build the same kind of system, but capable of taking a lot more people to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And that is what we're doing at our Starbase location in Texas with Starship.
Yeah, it's a super exciting area down there. Starship is a fully reusable transportation system designed to carry both crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the moon, Mars, and beyond. You can see it there on your photo. That was the first time that we stacked the Starship booster with the Starship flight vehicle and the grid fins that you see there. I can't possibly describe the scale. You know, we were just talking about, you know, right. Drone ship landings. Oh, everything seems so small. I mean, just multiply that feeling times 100 when you envision Starship. The first time I saw it with my own eyes, I wept with joy. It's just an incredible monster of a vehicle, and there's a view of that stacking next to what is essentially a fixed service structure there. And yeah, so it's super exciting to follow along with all the advancements. Everybody knows that it changes not on a monthly, not on a weekly, but a daily basis there in Starbase, Texas.
Yeah, and what I love that Starship is doing is they're very manufacturing and production focused, and that is very key for us to continue to fly and reuse these vehicles and learn as much as possible. But we also need to build them in the first place. And you know, the faster that we can build, the more that we can learn about designing it for manufacturability, designing it for that reusability. And again, we've done so much of that with Falcon and Dragon, and now taking that to Starship and using all that knowledge and improving, just constantly improving our manufacturing and production of these vehicles.
Absolutely. There's the innovation there, regardless of success or failure. It is constant because we're learning just every second that we continue to build down there.
Yeah, super excited to see what Starship has for us in the future. But we are marching towards 1 hour and 35 minutes until liftoff. Let's talk a little bit more about the mission today. So the crew is not going to the International Space Station. They will be lifting off from Pad 39A, spending about 3 days in orbit at a flight apogee of 575 kilometers. Here is an animation of where the crew will be at altitude-wise. They're going to be higher than the International Space Station, higher than the Hubble telescope, and honestly higher than any humans other than those that went to the moon.
Yeah, and you see that it's a little bit further out than the International Space Station. It will take a couple burns, about 45 minutes apart, for us to raise to that cruising orbit. And just something unique to that, if you followed along with our crew missions, there are multiple transfer burns that get us to the International Space Station. It's extremely precise maneuvering that needs to happen in order to dock with the International Space Station. As a reminder, these vehicles are going at 17,500 miles per hour. We don't need to do that for this mission. So we just need a couple burns to get us to that very far out orbit of 575 kilometers.
One thing we ought to alert folks is they watch the ascent and we see the second stage. We typically put up the velocity and the altitude of each of the vehicles. The Falcon 9 will put Dragon into the low Earth orbit about 190 kilometers by 575. So they don't go into the final orbit right away. Jesse, as you just said, we're going to very quickly after we get into orbit, I think before they take suits off or anything, we'll do burns of the Draco engines, the smaller ones, to lift that orbit a couple of steps to 575. So if you're watching in the webcast and you go, wow, the Dragon just separated, why isn't it showing 575 kilometers? That's because we've got 2 more burns that we've still got to go through.
Incredible shot there of pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. And like Andy mentioned before, this is going to 575 kilometers. This is the furthest that humans will have traveled away from planet Earth since the end of the Apollo program in 1972. So we are continuing to march toward T0, and it's safe to say that the energy is growing. It's becoming more and more real. I mean, with a blue sky like that, how can it not be real that, we're going to space today, hopefully. So proceeding towards the 1.5 hour mark here away from liftoff.
Yep. As Kate mentioned, hour and a half, a little bit more to go. In that view you see on your screens, the sun slowly beginning to set over Florida. Blue skies, wispy clouds. The weather continues to look good. Again, 90% probability of good weather, although for some reason they always like to report the probability of violation as 10%. So we look at the flip side and say 90% good weather. We will continue to watch as we get close in the next 90 minutes to T0 and the sun sets. Looking at ground level winds, and we're looking to see if there might be a pop-up thunder shower somewhere that creates what they call anvil clouds. That's something you don't want to fly the spacecraft through. The other thing that we've got is, I mentioned earlier, we are releasing balloons. The range is releasing balloons that allow us to measure wind speed and wind shear in the upper altitudes. Right now, the balloon data coming back shows upper altitude looks well behaved, so the weather, both here and around the world for the next few days, continuing to look good.
Yeah, John, you're mentioning this weather, and this is a very unique mission. Again, we're not going to the International Space Station, so we do have to make sure that weather is good on liftoff and returning back home. So the procedure for picking the launch window is actually a little bit different. We reserved a couple of days, a couple of 24-hour days for the mission, but had to wait until L-5 or 5 days before the first launch day that was selected to narrow it down to 12 hours. And then after that, we waited until L-3 to select the 5-hour launch window that we have today. And then we have 4 opportunities in each of those launch windows about an hour apart to lift off. So it's a very unique case. So we really just knew just 3 days ago what the T0 in the launch window would be.
Yeah, and one point to make, we may hear it from the crew, there are 4 launch opportunities in the 5-hour window that we're getting ready to come into here in 90 minutes. Right now we're also listening in for a quickie launch escape system check that the Dragon team's supposed to do at about T-minus 90 minutes. While we're waiting for that, you may hear the term T01. The tablets that the crew has, that Jarrett, mission commander, has, are set up for the first launch opportunity coming up in just under 90 minutes. So they call that one T01. The next one, about 102 minutes after that, is T02, then T03, and T04. But right now, everything continues to look good for T01 at 8:02 and 56 seconds p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time.
On screen right now is the crew on the left-hand side. On the foreground is Jared Isaacman. He is the mission commander, and we saw him interacting with the touchscreen monitors that are in front of them. Those will provide the crew with telemetry data, engine data, really anything they need for the mission. And now that the seats have been reclined upwards, they have access to those screens now.
As John mentioned before, we have a 5-hour launch window tonight with 4 opportunities in that 5-hour window. And the reason we actually have a window for a crew mission this time is, like Jesse said earlier, we're not going to the space station. So with space stations, it's an instantaneous launch window, really a moment, a fraction of a second, because of the final destination being the space station and having to chase it, catch up to it. Since we're not doing that today, the crew is actually going to an altitude above the space station. They'll be cruising around 575 kilometers above Earth. Because we're not chasing the station specifically, we have a little bit more flexibility to today's launch opportunities.
You're just now joining us. What you are seeing on your screen is the first all-civilian crew, Inspiration 4. They're all strapped into their seats inside of Dragon Resilience, preparing for T0 shortly here. We're just at T-minus 1 hour and 27 minutes. And they're completing some final procedures here. They've already done comms checks, suit leak checks, closed the hatch and done the hatch leak check. So the closeout team has exited the, or will be, they're preparing to finish their procedures there, and will be exiting the crew arm in roughly 26 minutes or so.
Yes, a lot of notable milestones of this mission. So Haley Arsenault will be the youngest American to go into space. She will be also the first with a prosthetic. Dr. Cyan Proctor will be the first Black female pilot of a spacecraft. This is the furthest that we're going to be sending humans since the Apollo missions. And I'm trying to recall them all in my mind. This is the first time that we're going to be having 3 Dragons in orbit. So we currently have 1 cargo Dragon and 1 crew Dragon at the International Space Station. This will be the 3rd. So a lot of exciting things to happen as part of today's Inspiration 4 mission.
Exactly. It's been an exciting day so far. And if you're just now joining us, you are watching the very first all-civilian mission to orbit, known as Inspiration 4. At T-minus 7 hours, the crew woke up. Shortly after that, they performed some medical checks prior to their first meal of the day, which they had at Hangar X with some friends and family, and then followed by crew walkout of Hangar X as they made their way to their Teslas.
Yep, and they hopped into the Teslas and made their way towards the suit-up room, SpaceX's debut of the suit-up room in the Falcon support building. They attended the pre-launch briefing there and then also began donning their spacesuits.
And then, of course, at around T-minus 3 hours, we had the crew walkout. That was followed by the transportation to the pad and hopping in the elevators, ascending the tower that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen. Made one last phone call to their friends and family before, heading down to the White Room, which is the area that they get to sign their names prior to hopping in.
Yep, and then the crew got inside the Dragon Capsule, a process also known as ingress. We performed some communication checks. We rotated the seats upwards. And then before hatch closeout, we performed suit leak checkouts, as well as final interior inspections of any type of debris inside of the Dragon capsule.
And then we saw the closure of the side hatch. They performed the leak check on that side hatch. We got good news there. Everything was good. And at this point, we are awaiting the LES checks, which will, once those are complete, we'll get the okay for the closeout crew to leave the White Room.
Then we get inside T-minus 1 hour. Things get, that's where it finally starts to pick up. We'll be having the various teams poll themselves. The Dragon team's mission director checking out. Chief engineer is going to be doing polls. The launch director does poll. The closeout team gets clear of the blast danger area at T-minus 50 minutes. And then the biggies, the dynamic event, so to speak, 45 minutes, we do the prop load go for prop and for launch. We'll then retract the crew access arm. So the arm that you see on the right-hand side that's up against Dragon right now, even with the hatch closed, that'll retract away. It takes a couple of minutes. Once that's out of the way, the crew's going to arm the launch escape system. Getting exciting already. Propellant load will begin at T-minus 35 minutes, as is traditional for Falcon 9, and then we will count down for an on-time launch at 8:02:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Now, one thing, we're going to a 575-kilometer altitude orbit today. Dragon will take itself up there after the Falcon 9 drops it off. And I was looking on my maps, and from here to the Golden Gate Bridge, Hawthorne, California, where we're seeing the Golden Gate Bridge, is 573 kilometers. So if you drove from here to the Golden Gate Bridge, take us about the same amount of time as when crew woke up at T-minus 8 hours or so. You could get there and do the same distance. The only difference is, while I may be doing the speed limit all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge, you'll never get to space trying to drive your car vertically upwards. It takes a lot more energy over a short period of time, and that's one thing that makes, as we like to say, launch is hard or space is hard. You've got to essentially take, as Kate mentioned earlier, that 1 million pounds of propellant and find a way to burn it in 10 minutes so you can get your velocity up to 17,500 miles an hour, about 7.5 kilometers per second, and that'll finally get Falcon 9's second stage and the Dragon into orbit. Now, there's one thing I do want to mention. Dragon goes into orbit, but the second stage is going just as fast. It's just Dragon will pop off. So both will be in orbit, and then later on, the second stage comes back down to Earth, burns up. We don't try to land it. That'll be on the Starship program.
Yeah, we are about an hour and 20 minutes away from liftoff and eventual stage separation of the Dragon. But in addition to the science and supplies going up onto the Inspiration 4 mission, the crew's also taken along some personal items for their 3-day trip around the planet. We caught up with the crew during training to get a little more insight on what each of them are planning to take into space.
The most special item I'm bringing up to space is this custom jewelry I had made for my wife and 2 daughters. It's a dragon pendant, if you will, and so it'll be going in my satchel on suit-up day, and I'm going to fly it in space for them. I think we all now have like a really close connection with dragons, and this seemed really appropriate, something hopefully my family will want to pass along for generations to come.
What I have here today are a couple things that my mother-in-law has asked me to take up into space for her, and some of the connections to these items are just kind of special. So what I have here are 2 pins. They're both orders of the Eastern Star. I mean, if you can take a look at that and see those, but that's that one, and then there's a smaller one here, and this guy here. But these belonged not to her, but to her great-grandmother. The reason it's important to me is not only is it talking about some history and some family connections. My grandfather on my mom's side was a Mason, and my grandmother was also an order member of the Eastern Star, and they were 2 of the coolest people I think I knew. My grandfather had a way of really making anyone feel at ease and welcoming anyone he saw, regardless of their background or where they were from or what they thought. And knowing that, that being able to take up little pins like this that represent something that meant a lot to him and to other folks that in my family, I think that means a lot.
I'm very happy to report that I have turned in all of my payload. I've been thinking about what I wanted to bring to space since January, and I finally turned everything in. And one thing that I'm really excited about that I'm bringing to space is this old picture of me. This is when I was 10 years old and going through bone cancer treatment. And so when I'm in space, I'm going to pull this photo out, and now getting to be in space, my hair is going to float everywhere, but yet hold this old picture of me and show all my patients, all these kids going through cancer treatment around the world, that there's a future, that it gets better, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Our training's going really well. One of the other big things we've been working on is our packing for space list, which, I mean, how often do you get to say that you get to pack for space? And thinking about items that are important to us, that have meaning in some way, that we really want to bring with us. And so I have an item here. It's around my neck that I will take off. And this is a ring. And it's my dad's ring. And it's really cool because it's a Thunderbird. And my dad used to wear this all the time. And he passed away when I was 19. So I don't know the origin story of this, but it's a unique design and it's pressed into the ring. And my dad absolutely loved it. And like I said, wore it all the time. And unfortunately, both my parents have passed away. So my mom, I can't even ask her, like, what's the story behind this ring? But I think my dad actually got this before he met my mom. So he's had it for a very long time. And so I'm going to bring that to space to represent my dad. I have my mom's ring here to represent her. And so I've got both my parents, and then something kind of unique and special that they got for me when I was born is this commemorative coin from the island of Guam. So it says Guam, USA, and it says where America's day begins. And so I've had this coin, and has 1970 on it because that's the year I was born. And so I feel like this is the first gift my parents ever got for me, was this coin when I was born, and I've had it now for 51 years. And so I'm bringing that to space with me. So I have my coin, and then I have my 2 rings from my parents. And I'm excited to bring them along for this incredible, amazing journey experience. And thank you for everything that you've done to help me get there.
Love seeing how they've all selected things to take with them. You know, in space, weight is everything. So while they probably wanted to take as much as they could, there are limitations, but it seemed like the common theme was family. Personally, I think my favorite thing is the photo of Haley that she's taking. Like she said, she underwent treatment for bone cancer when she was 10, and she's taking up a photo. And of course, she's going to have a photo of herself floating there with hair. And I just love that she's going to have the opportunity to show the patients that she treats at St. Jude that it gets better, and that they can grow up and be an astronaut one day too.
Yeah, I think Jared's memento of a dragon is par for the course today, as they are all seated in Dragon. So I think that him and his family are going to have tons of memories to come and be able to share that for generations to come too.
Yeah, I love that they get to take a little bit of something with them. As we've been talking throughout this whole mission, it seems so personal. You know, they get personalized suits. And now they get to bring something with them, some memorabilia for themselves, which I think is really important for a mission like this. So in addition to the space science, in addition to the science supplies and personal items, the Inspiration 4 crew is also taking up a number of items that will be auctioned off to help raise money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. This includes an original Kings of Leon NFT that was created using live show visuals and a live recording of the band's new single, Time in Disguise, recorded during their hometown show in Nashville just a few weeks ago. The NFT was loaded onto an iPhone 12 and will be played by one of the Inspiration 4 crew members while in space. And there's going to be a bunch of other cool stuff going up that will be auctioned off as well.
Yeah, there's quite a list of things that are heading up. Some of you might recall the Time magazine that was recently published with the Inspiration 4 crew. I think it was such an iconic shot. It was very stoic looking. And there's going to be a copy of that flying on this mission, and the crew will autograph it after the Dragon Capsule splashes down in a couple of days. And of course, something for little ones, there's a handful of plastic and plush STEM toys based on the animated series Space Racers. So again, all of these things are available through auction, which is currently live.
Yeah, I love, there's going to be a ukulele in space. Chris is going to be playing a ukulele, and then it's going to come back and be up for auction again, all for a great cause. So I'm so excited to, one, hear him play, and two, see a ukulele in space.
Yeah, and again, this mission is a fundraiser for St. Jude, and I love that they're going to even have some Inspiration for Mission jackets, which are going to feature some artwork from some of the patients at St. Jude, which is going to be pretty incredible. I think that's definitely something I'm going to try and get.
And there's something on board that I know John I loves, pens that write in space.
Yeah.
They've got the, for those who remember, we had the Fisher space pens that worked in microgravity. And so Fisher has got a 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 that was a couple of years ago. But they're flying that in a coin set into space, and they've included material that's actually from Apollo 11. So something else interesting to bid on.
Yeah, super cool. They're also taking up a customized Mont Blanc Starwalker writing instrument, as well as some stationery that the crew will get to journal about, their experience in space while they're up there. Like I mentioned before, this auction is open. Actually, it opened on Thursday, September 9th, and it will run through November with all of these different items, including the ones we mentioned and more. They'll all be available at various points during the overall mission. And you can bid on these auction items if any of them called to you. Head on over to stjude.org/inspiration4 and check them out.
We're T-minus 1 hour, 11 minutes, 21 seconds, counting down. Everything continues to go well. We also did hear during that last segment, the closeout team has left the crew access arm. So we're actually still running about 19 minutes ahead of schedule on the closeout activities. Earlier I got in my pitch for my usual, hey, launch is hard, space is hard, and this is kind of the rockets and spacecraft 101. One of the things I thought about, why is it hard? Why can't you just aim your car and go up, 575 kilometers? And we talked a little bit about, hey, you've got to get 1 million pounds of propellant. You've got to figure out how to burn it in 10 minutes. You've got to steer the rocket, so you've got to be able to have engines that move, can, withstand wind gusts, get the rockets on the right trajectory. Then we're talking about like the space pen that works in microgravity. You think about it, when our first stage is getting ready to come back to Earth, there's no gravity. So that means none of the propellant is down at the bottom of the inlets to the engines. So that's one of the things you have to work in space, both here and on Dragon. How do you get propellant into the inlet of the pumps and the valves so that instead you're not pushing gas through there? And that's a bad thing that happens when you want liquid and you only get gas going through your rocket. So that's just one of the things that we've got to do. And of course, we've got to fight the force of gravity. 9.8 meters per second squared we've got to overcome. And so I don't know about you, but when I took physics class, as always, you're sitting on a sled on a frozen pond. It's frictionless. And then how fast do you throw the bricks overboard that are on your sled to essentially make the sled move? And how fast can you go depends on how fast you throw the bricks out. And that leads you to the famous rocket equation. Look that one up. You can see that, but essentially it all comes down to how efficient is the engine and how efficient is the structure. And in the case of the Falcon 9, we tried to be as mass efficient as we could so that we carry mostly propellant with just a thin skin of tank around it to hold it. So the more propellant you've got and the less tank and the less weight of the engines, the more efficient you're going to be, and that way you can carry more into space. And that eventually is where we're going, put humanity out into space.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about the time of launch, and today is a little bit different because we have up to 4 opportunities to launch our inspiration for crew members. But if we're doing things like trying to rendezvous with the International Space Station, we have to target a very, very specific window. And so depending on the profile of the launch, how high we're sending it, which type of orbit we're sending it, liftoff time does play a factor into that.
Yeah, one of the important things on, we talked about earlier is we don't have a 1 second window today. We've got a 5.2 hour window. It's a 1 second window when we're going to the space station because we have to synchronize the launch with when the space station's orbital plane is passing over Florida. It's not exactly overhead. We have to lead it a little bit. But if you think about it, in Florida, we're rotating at about almost 1,500 kilometers an hour going eastward. Doesn't feel like that, but, put your seatbelts on. The Earth is rotating. That's 25 kilometers every minute. So if you waited about like a 15-minute launch window, all of a sudden the space station's 375 kilometers east of where you are on the ground, and it takes a tremendous amount of propellant to make up that kind of error. So that's one of the challenges why orbital dynamics is important. You've got to know when you're going to launch, where you headed. A lot of people care where the sun is when you get into orbit. If you have got solar rays, then you need power right away on a satellite. So orbital dynamics, another great thing to study in school, because if you don't know where you're going to go and how to get there, you won't get there.
Yeah, John, you've been talking a lot about all the things that go into, designing and building a rocket that can do all the things that we've been doing, flying to orbit, taking payloads to orbit, taking humans to orbit. We've got a lot of history and a lot of things that we've learned. We didn't do this by ourselves. We worked very closely with NASA, and we've learned so much from them. We wouldn't be here today without the support of NASA and the knowledge that they have. Can you talk a little bit about things like the particular things that NASA has brought to the team?
Yeah, that NASA partnership goes way back. I joined SpaceX 2006, right when we were competing for what was called the COTS Space Act Agreement, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Service, where NASA said, hey, we can't pay companies to develop systems from scratch, but we can give you essentially some seed money. So they had a competition. SpaceX was one of the winners. Elon put a lot of his money in. But working with NASA on the early Falcon 9 and the Dragon, we learned things like, what are some of the best practices? A lot of our engineers would pull off of the NASA tech library, how do you do hold down systems or quick disconnect systems? What's worked in the past? So we essentially got to leverage that, all those lessons learned from decades by NASA. And then we learned things like, okay, we're going to send cargo to the space station. What does it mean to physically touch the space station? What are the requirements? Then how do you verify them to NASA? It's like somebody wants to bring a big truck into your garage and you know that your garage door is only so high. You're not just going to let them drive in. You're going to go measure that before it happens.
Yeah.
So we went from that. We took astronauts to the space station. Each step of the way, NASA's been helping us understand what it means to get into space. What are some of those requirements that we've leveraged to do human spaceflight that you see here today?
Yeah, it is super exciting. Again, we've been learning a lot from NASA throughout the years. Kate has a very special guest interview. Kate, I'll throw it to you.
Thanks, Andy. Joining us now from Cape Canaveral is none other than Charlie Bolden, former NASA astronaut and administrator. Welcome.
Kate, it's great to be with you, and I was enjoying listening to the story, and I think you all are being somewhat modest. We learned quite a bit from SpaceX as we began to partner also.
Thank you so much for that. Now, Charlie, like I mentioned, you were a NASA astronaut that then became the NASA administrator, and that happened at a pivotal time both in the history of NASA and commercial space. Were either one of those roles something that you dreamed of doing as a kid?
No, as a matter of fact, I tell kids all the time, I never dreamed of being an astronaut because I grew up in the segregated South, and that was just not, that was not something that was going to happen. I had no desire to fly airplanes. I thought flying was inherently dangerous, and but at the age of 12 in 7th grade, I fell in love with a place called the United States Naval Academy, watching a program on television called Men of Annapolis, and I struggled to get there, and when I finally got there, that led to my going into the Marine Corps, which led to my going to flight school, which led to my going to test pilot school, which led to my meeting the late, great Dr. Ron McNair, who was in the first group of space shuttle astronauts selected. And he's the guy that embarrassed me into applying for the space program. So I kind of fell into it. I don't recommend that kids follow my example, though.
Well, it sounds like you've had quite the journey throughout your career. And speaking of journeys, we talked a little bit earlier about the history of Pad 39A, which we see over your shoulder there in the distance. How does space travel look different from the days when you were an astronaut compared to the last 10 years or so?
You know, Kate, I think it's dramatically different. I mean, the techniques, the orbital mechanics, everything, all the laws and everything are the same, but it's the face of space flight today that is dramatically different. I'm so excited to be here this evening for this launch because, you know, I was telling somebody earlier today, just the thought of having an all-commercial crew, a crew of non-professional astronauts lift off from the same launch pad where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin left before they stepped on the moon is just flabbergasting. It's sort of it's the complete cycle of a tale to get us from where it was nothing but government to where now we can actually have an all-civilian, all-commercial flight where NASA's really not involved.